Hello and welcome to Yin Yoga. I am Andrea Clausen, and today we are going to do a practice with the theme of transitions. And so when we think about this theme, we might think of transitions from a seasonal lens. We might also be thinking of transitions between postures, between one part of your day onto the next. So we'll kind of start by just settling into your space. So maybe you're at home or maybe you're somewhere else. So you might have seen your space hundreds of times, but let's kind of get acquainted with the space from a new lens. So maybe just start to kind of look around, just turning your head and just noticing where you're practicing. And then we'll just kind of start coming back through to center, turning the head back, straight ahead, and then just starting to look out your left eye. Without turning the head, notice what your eyes settle upon. And just look at that item or that space and just take a few deep breaths here. And then we'll go ahead and blink the eyes a few times. And then do the same thing over to the right. Without turning the head, just kind of look out the right eye. What do you observe? And take a few deep breaths, keeping your focus on that point. And then once more, we'll come back through to center, just opening and closing the eyes. And then we'll just take a moment to get grounded. You might close the eyes if that feels comfortable, or stare softly down at the earth. Palms can flip down for that grounding. And then just starting to arrive here for your practice, taking an inhale through the nose. Open mouth, exhale. Taking that once more, breathing in through the nose. And sigh it out if that feels comfortable. And then just starting to become aware of the physical body, maybe for the first time today. You might start to soften through the shoulders, maybe rolling the neck out. Maybe opening and enclosing the jaw, releasing tension through the face. Softening through the forehead, around the eyes. And just finding a few deep breaths. Starting to lengthen out that inhale to exhale. And continuing to do a body scan if there's any space that's calling your attention. Maybe you want to bring some movement there. Or maybe just bringing the breath. Noticing how the body is speaking to you right now. As you continue that breath, noticing that transition from your inhale to your exhale. That slight pause at the top and bottom. And feeling that transition from one part of your day onto your yoga mat. And then if the eyes were closed, you might gently blink them open. We'll prepare for this first posture, which is going to be a dragonfly posture. And so with props for this, you might use a few blocks. You could have a bolster. If you have tighter hamstrings, maybe you want to sit on the edge of a blanket. And for that dragonfly posture, we'll take the legs out wide. And then a few options here. This might be it for you. Maybe this feels wonderful and you don't want any props. And you just kind of want to have blocks out in front and you just fold forward. Palms might be up towards the sky. Or these blocks can go out in front any height. And taking that bolster on top of those blocks, folding forward, maybe the forehead rests down, maybe the chin rests in the hands. Or you could turn that bolster tall, folding forward, and those palms can rest on the backs of those blocks. And so really exploring this shape, finding any variation that feels best to you. And taking your time as you kind of get settled in this posture. In yin, often our feet stay soft, and so we don't have to flex the feet back towards the face. And often the eyes might close or stare at one point out in front of the body. And then settling back into that breath. And in yin classes, often the 2 times that we move in these postures after we settle into this stillness is maybe the body is craving a little different variation of the pose, and maybe the body starts to open and you fold a little bit deeper, releasing some of the props. Or maybe you've had enough and you want to come out of this pose before I mention the time. You can always exit the pose early and maybe just rest on your back or your belly and just finding the breath there. And so making this practice your own. And just finding those deep breaths. Anchoring here in your practice. Feeling that back body expand and open with that inhale and contract with that exhale. We'll take a couple more deep breaths here. And with one of those next exhales or so, making your way out of that posture. Maybe taking those props off to the side. You might come to rest on the back. And just taking this mini pause, which is part of that work in Yin. And sometimes this transition period of nothing to do, nowhere to go, can seem difficult, but just noticing where the mind goes. And then you might roll over to your right or left side in the next few breaths, and we'll all meet back in that seated posture. Preparing for this second pose, which is going to be fire log. And so for fire log, we are going to go into the hips, and so you might take that right leg out underneath and that left leg can come up on top. And maybe those knees and ankles perfectly align, and that feels wonderful. You could also take a block underneath between that knee and ankle. An option to fold forward, so you could take a bolster or a block. Maybe you want to fold. If the feet and the knees don't quite align, you can always back off, and maybe this is your starting point, and you start more in that cross-legged position with one foot on top of the other. And so really exploring what's going to feel best here on this side. And then once you're there, settling in, finding that breath. And Yin Yoga can be like drinking a cup of coffee, a nice warm cup of coffee. You start drinking it too fast, you might get burned. But if the cup of coffee sits on the counter all day, it's pretty cold. And it's lost some of its luster. And that can be the same with Yin. If we go into a pose too fast, too soon, and our body wasn't ready for it, we might feel that sensation a little too quickly, leading to some pain or maybe even injury. But on the flip side, if we come into this pose and we never kind of find our healthy edge, we lose that luster and magic of Yin opening through the fascia. And only you know that answer and that magic code for yourself, just like coffee. We all have our different brands we enjoy. So finding your own brand of Yin, what does that look like in your body? What is the magic pose of the day saying to you? Continuing to find that breath. with one of those next exhales, you might just pause and notice which leg is on top for you. Maybe you followed me, maybe not, but you could always put a block off to that side of the leg that's on top to remember. And anchor those feet down. You could windshield wiper those legs side to side. You can straighten them and just resting here in that pause. And when you're ready, we'll switch to that opposite side. So if you're following me, you might have that left leg down on the bottom and that right leg on top now. And as we settle into that second side, each side has its own story to tell. And so noticing if this side needs different props, a slightly different variation. And then finding those first few deep breaths. And once more, those eyes can close or stare softly at a point in front of you. Noticing if any space is gripping that doesn't need to be melting a little more. And slowly finding your way out of that posture once more. And taking the time, finding the stretch of the legs, rolling through the ankles, and that little pause in between. And finding that transition with this next one, as we are going to be transitioning from a lower body to an upper body focus with this next pose. And so in the in-between on this side, we're just going to do a little quadrant tapping to become aware of that upper body. So we'll make a fist with that right hand tapping onto that left arm, going with pressure that feels best for you. You could also take an open palm and just tapping on the inside and outside of that left arm, moving that lymph around. waking up the arms through the shoulders. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing over to that right arm, tapping with that fist, open palm, bringing some energy to the upper body. And then we'll come back over to that left leg. And then you might have both fist, open fist, going through the front and the back side of the upper leg, down that IT band, the outside part of that leg, into the calves. And then we'll do that same thing over to that right leg. And then we're just gonna find a pause on the belly. So you might come to lie on the belly for a few breaths before we come into that pose. So maybe the palms are right underneath the forehead and the feet are flipped back behind you. Just taking a few diaphragmatic breaths, breathing into the low belly, feeling it connect to the earth. And then feeling everything soften. A few more breaths just like that. And then we're going to get ready for melting heart. And so we're going to come back up to a tabletop position. If you're on more of a hardwood floor or even on carpet, maybe you want an extra blanket underneath the knees for a little padding here. And then for melting heart, a few options for this pose. Those arms can be straight out in front of you. And maybe the forehead just rests down on the earth and those hips stay somewhat over those knees. Maybe the arms are lengthened, maybe the forearms rest down. If the head is not connected to something, you could always bring a block underneath for a little support. Or even that bolster underneath the chest for a little support or elevation of the floor. If at any point this does not feel wonderful into those knees and hips, you can always press into a child's pose. So maybe you press back over a bolster or just resting on the earth in a child's pose. So any of those variations or a combo of melting heart to child's pose, always welcome. So settling into your version, I will let us know when we're halfway if you want to move between the two different postures of melting heart and child's pose. But finding that breath and observing where the earth connects to the forehead and connects to the palms and the knees. And letting the earth support you. And we're about halfway. If you want to stay right where you are, or maybe press into that child's pose. And letting that breath be the guide. And your choice to stay where you are. Maybe you're already in a child's pose, or maybe you want to press into one. You could also come to rest back on the belly, how we started with that diaphragmatic breath. So kind of choosing between the two, or maybe you want a little cat-cow, a little movement. But just finding a pose to settle in that pause, in that transition between. And then we're going to slowly make our way down to the belly if you haven't already. Coming into a Sphinx posture next. And so for this pose, in Yin, it's okay if those shoulders creep up by the ears. You can have those legs extended back behind. If the angle is too much with the shoulders and elbows stacked, you can walk those elbows farther away from you to reduce that angle on that low back. And if you found a few breaths here and the low back has said, I'm done for that, you can come back to a crocodile, heels in, toes turned out, forehead resting down. And so any variation here, if you have a block, you could also take a block underneath the forehead to round forward, letting that neck relax. And so taking your time, finding that version that feels best in your body here. And the eyes again might soften or close. And this is a great pose to work on digestion. And not just digestion in terms of what we eat, but what we take in with our senses. In Ayurveda, we digest not just what we consume. And so maybe some open mouth. Releasing some energy, some stuckness. the next breath or so, we might all meet down in that crocodile, turning those heels in, toes out. Forehead might rest down in the palms, softening those shoulders. Taking that pause here. Letting that fascia settle. And then we'll just roll over onto our backs. So coming down to the back, getting settled here, moving any props as needed. We're going to be coming into a reclined twist. And so as we're resting and on the back, a couple options for this twist. You might have a bolster sitting next to that right hip. And just taking that left knee up at 90 degrees, guiding that left leg across and letting that knee and ankle rest on the bolster. That left arm can open out to the side or field goal. If that left shoulder is off the mat quite a bit, you could always put a blanket underneath for a little extra padding. And then if this doesn't feel good, you can also take a bolster between the knees and letting those legs fall across, coming into a twist variation. So either one of those twist options, whatever is going to feel best in your body. And so finding that version as we get settled in on this side. And then if you want a little extra grounding, sometimes it's nice to put a blanket or even a sandbag up on that top hip. And once more, those sighs sometimes are really delicious in a twist. You might stay looking up towards the sky, since we hold these twists a little longer than in like a vinyasa or hatha class. And with that next exhale or so, untwisting and just letting yourself pause on your back. Your knees could be bent or straight, maybe even windshield wiper, knocked knees, and just taking a little pause. Finding those slow, deep breaths. If you have any props you want to shift over to that left hip, you might move blocks or bolsters over to that left hip. And then we'll do that same straightening through the left leg, this time letting that right leg come across or letting both knees fall over towards that bolster. Again, that optional blanket on the hip. Finding that twist variation to that opposite side and giving yourself a few breaths to settle in. And a few open mouth exhales. Finding that comfort here. I wanted to read a passage from Divine Me by Phoebe Garnsworthy, since our theme is transitions. The poem I picked out is called Caged Butterfly. I'm ready to take the risk and leap wild into the unknown. And even if I end up nowhere, at least I will have spent a year of my life trying something new that's made me feel more alive than spending an eternity safe within the walls I've built around myself. Is there anywhere you could soften a little more? Maybe through the fingers or toes even. And then we're gonna exhale back through to center once more, resting in that mini Shavasana posture and letting the fascia settle, letting that mind settle. I think of it like a snow globe when we shake it during the posture. And then when we put the snow globe down, everything just kind of relaxes and settles in. That in between, that's where we're at right now. get ready for Banana Asana by walking those feet over towards the right corner of your mat. Walking the arms up and over towards the right corner in that banana shape or half moon shape. Maybe you even cross the left ankle on top of the right, but notice how that feels in your body. And so sometimes we take it without actually just pausing. Does this feel good to me? And if it doesn't, don't take it. Find your unique expression. Find your nice cup of coffee where you find your own balance. It's not too rich and doesn't have no flavor. Find your unique flavor. And continue to focus this breath into that left rib cage. Feeling it open and expand like an accordion with the inhale and contract with the exhale. We'll start to walk the arms and legs to center, taking that tall body stretch, that reach, that little pause, just for a couple breaths. And then you might walk over to that left corner and taking the legs and arms towards that left side. Then you could have, as I've kept this blanket on my pelvis, this just is nice for a little extra grounding, or even a sandbag. So often this pose for myself can feel very expressive and opening. And so if I want that grounding, a blanket or sandbag here can help ground that energy, especially as we're towards the end of class here. And so maybe you do a little scavenger hunt within the body, observing opposite qualities. An example would be with my breath, I can feel my right side body opening, and my left side body in this posture feels more contracted. My fingers and toes feel a little chilly, but my pelvis feels warm with the blanket covering it. And so you might just kind of go on your own body scavenger hunt, observing those opposite qualities. And not judging, because that's not what our intention is. We're just bringing our awareness and witnessing What's going on with ourselves today, knowing it can be different tomorrow. And then we'll slowly walk everything back through to center. And maybe letting those arms rest at the sides. We just have one final posture before Shavasana. And it's going to be a reclined butterfly. And so you could have blocks for this. And so option is just to have those soles of the feet together, knees open, maybe no props. And again, I'm going to keep this blanket here for my extra grounding, but you do not need that. If you are feeling like you want some more energy, depending on what time of the day too, if it's in the morning, maybe you want that energy. You could have blocks underneath those upper thighs as support. If you don't have blocks, but maybe you have that bolster, you could also use that bolster underneath. And so you take that butterfly with the bolster supporting underneath the backs of the legs. And so finding any of those versions that feel best to you. The arms can rest inwards on the belly, or maybe they open to that field goal if you want a little chest expansion. And so finding your flavor of posture here in this reclined butterfly. What is your body craving to complete the practice? Maybe you try one on and you realize, oh, it's not quite this version. You can always shift out of it to find the flavor for you. And then again, those eyes might soften, deepening into your breath. As we have our last few minutes in this pose, maybe tapping into that theme of transitions as we've had with our practice today. As transitioning from doing the postures into the resting and being of Shavasana is a transition of itself. and honoring that sweetness of transitions. And just observing how the mind, maybe its first reactions to that word, to now, where you're at with that word of transitions. How does it feel? Maybe it's the same, and that's okay too. And last couple deep breaths here. And then we'll start to transition into our final Shavasana or resting space. If you have that bolster underneath, maybe you just want to lengthen the legs out, letting them rest over that bolster. Maybe you have a different Shavasana in mind. You could always take a bolster behind you, maybe a block elevating it, resting over the top of that bolster. But finding your final resting Shavasana and settling into that shape. And not skipping out on this part of the practice. Feeling that nourishment once more of the earth beneath you. And once you've arrived in that resting shape, take an inhale through the nose and an open mouth exhale once more. We'll be here in this stillness for the next few minutes. And I'll let you know when it's time to come out. Slowly start to awaken fingers and toes, maybe wiggling them or turning the head side to side. And deepening into the breath. And then just observing, if you have a more active day ahead, you might roll to that left side. If you have a more restorative day ahead, you might roll to that right side, which opens that opposite energy channel in the body. And just taking a pause there. Resting on the side for a few deep breaths. And then slowly pressing to a seated position to seal off your practice. We'll go ahead and bring those palms together up above our heads, bringing them down to your third eye, trusting your intuition. Bringing your hands to your lips, speaking your truth. Bringing your hands to heart center, knowing yourself. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Bowing in so much gratitude. Thank you so much. Thank you for embarking on this transitional yin practice with me. I'm Andrea. Let me know if you have any questions.